had never imagined a day like this would come. Divorce was a word I had never thought would belong in my life, but here I was, sitting in a cold, uncomfortable courtroom, waiting for my fate to be decided. My fingers were trembling slightly as I gripped the sides of the wooden bench. The air was heavy with tension, and the sound of my heart pounding in my chest seemed too loud in the quiet of the room. It was like I could hear the echoes of my life unraveling around me. Mark sat across from me, his lawyer beside him, both of them calm, collected. I, on the other hand, was struggling to hold myself together. I had spent the past year in an emotional fog, trying to understand what had gone wrong in my marriage. One moment, everything had been fine, and the next, it felt like I was falling apart. But here I was, on the brink of losing everything I had worked for, everything I had built. Our house, our finances, even the respect I once had for myself, it was all on the line. I could barely look at Mark. His presence in this room was a reminder of the man I had loved and trusted, the man who had broken me in ways I wasn't sure I could heal from. He had cheated. He had lied. And now, he was trying to take everything from me. The courtroom felt sterile, almost suffocating. The judge, a man in his mid-50s with a serious expression, sat at the front, flipping through pages of documents. His face gave nothing away, but I could tell he had seen this kind of thing 100 times. Divorce. The destruction of lives, of families. He probably couldn't wait to wrap this up and move on to the next case. The lawyer representing Mark stood up to speak, his voice calm and steady. "Your Honor, we are here today to finalize the terms of the divorce. My client, Mr. Davis, has agreed to a fair and reasonable settlement. He is asking for full custody of their son, Jake, and wishes to have primary control over their joint assets." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Full custody? I couldn't breathe. I looked at Mark, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was busy flipping through some papers on the table in front of him. He looked so detached, like he was already done with this, like he didn't care anymore. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about our son. The lawyer continued, "We are willing to offer a reasonable amount for child support, and Mr. Davis is open to negotiation regarding the division of assets, though he would like to retain the house." I felt my hands start to shake harder. The house? How could he ask for the house? The one thing that was mine. It was where I had spent years building a life. It was where we had raised our son. I had been so focused on keeping things calm, trying to navigate the pain of this divorce with grace, but hearing those words, hearing him claim everything I loved, sent a surge of anger through me. My breath caught in my throat, and I was on the verge of tears. "Your Honor," I finally managed to speak, my voice shaky but firm, "I have put everything I am into this family. I've supported Mark through everything. And now he wants to take everything from me. My home, my son. I don't understand why I am being punished for something I didn't do." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't cry in front of him, not again. I had cried too many times already. I had been crying for months, ever since the day I found out about the affair. It was hard enough to get through the days, but now, this was too much. The judge, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "Ms. Davis, I understand this is a difficult situation, but as I'm sure you're aware, this court is concerned with what is in the best interest of the child. The custody arrangement will be decided based on that, not on your personal grievances." I nodded, trying to stay calm, but inside I was screaming. Best interest of the child? If they thought giving full custody to Mark was in Jake's best interest, they didn't know him. Jake was my son, and I was the one who had been there for him through every moment of his life. I was the one who had been the steady presence. I couldn't believe I was sitting here, pleading for my son, and Mark was sitting there, looking so unbothered, as if he was entitled to everything we had built. The court hearing continued, with back-and-forth arguments, each side presenting their case. I tried to focus on the words to understand the process, but it was hard. Every time I looked at Mark, the anger and hurt I had been suppressing bubbled up inside me. How could he do this? How could he destroy everything and walk away as if nothing mattered? Hours passed. I felt like my life was being dissected, like I was being stripped of everything I had worked so hard for. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to stand up and walk out. But I couldn't. I had to stay. For Jake, I had to fight for him. Finally, the judge turned to both of us. "It's time for final statements. Ms. Davis, would you like to speak? I took a deep breath, my chest tight with emotion. I stood up, my legs feeling weak, but I forced myself to hold it together. This was my moment. I had to make it count. I looked at the judge, then at Mark, who finally met my eyes. His expression was unreadable, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to beg him to be a part of Jake's life. I wasn't going to beg him to love me. He had already proven that he couldn't be trusted. I want what's best for my son, I began, my voice steady. And I know I am the best person for him. I've been there for him every single day of his life. I've loved him with everything I have, and I've given him the stability he needs. I'm not perfect, but I've always tried to be the best mother I could be, and I will continue to be, with or without Mark's support. But I will not let him take my son from me. Jake needs me, and I will fight for him, no matter what it takes. I will not let Mark's mistakes or his betrayal destroy the life I've worked so hard to build. I've been broken, but I'm not weak, and I won't let my son's future be controlled by someone who doesn't care about him the way I do. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for justice. I could feel the power of my words, and for the first time since the hearing started, I felt like I had control again. I was no longer the woman who had been thrown aside. I was a mother, fighting for her child. I sat back down, my hands shaking, but a fire burning inside me. I wasn't going to let Mark destroy me. Not now, not ever. The rest of the hearing went by in a blur. I barely heard the arguments as my lawyer and Mark's lawyer debated back and forth, but I didn't care anymore. I had said what I needed to say, and now I was waiting for the decision. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but finally he spoke. Based on the evidence presented, the court will grant joint custody, with primary custody awarded to Ms. Davis. It is clear that she has been the primary caregiver and has a stronger emotional bond with the child. As for the financial settlement, we will arrange a fair division of assets. I sat there stunned. The words barely sank in at first. Primary custody, I won. I looked at Mark. His face was pale. His mouth was set in a tight line. He wasn't expecting this. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: victory. I left the courtroom with my head held high. I had done it. I had fought for what was mine, for my son, and I had won. Walking out into the bright sunlight, I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone control my fate again. I was stronger than I had ever been, and I was ready to build a future for myself and Jake. I had been knocked down, betrayed, and humiliated, but I was no longer the woman I had been. I was a survivor, and nothing could take that away from me. As I walked down the steps of the courthouse, my son by my side, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I was in control now, and nothing, not even the past, could stop me. The courtroom was a place I never thought I'd be. It felt cold, the kind of cold that makes you shiver even when the air is warm. The chairs, the walls, even the sound of the gavel hitting the wood, it was all so sterile. So final. I didn't belong here, or so I thought. I had never imagined that the life I had fought for, that I had built so carefully over the years, would be reduced to this: a legal battle, a tug-of-war for custody, for our home, and for everything that was once mine. Now, all of it was in question. Mark sat across from me, his face unreadable. His lawyer was speaking, making his case, and for a brief moment, I wondered if Mark felt the same way I did, like everything was crumbling, bit by bit, right in front of us. But when I looked at him, I didn't see guilt. I didn't see remorse. All I saw was a man who had made his choice and was standing by it. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. My lawyer sat beside me, and though I knew she was on my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all slipping away. The life we had, the family we once were, it was all disappearing. And no matter how hard I tried to stay calm, the reality was sinking in. It was my turn to speak. My lawyer gave me a gentle nod, urging me to go ahead. The words I wanted to say were stuck, like they were lodged in my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Your Honor," I started, my voice a little shaky but firm, "I'm here today because I have worked my entire life to create a home for my son. I have been there for him in every way I could, and I will continue to be there, no matter what." I paused for a moment, steadying myself. But I don't understand how I'm being punished for something I didn't do. I don't understand why I'm being stripped of everything. My voice cracked at the last words, and I hated myself for it. I hated how I felt like I was losing everything in this room. The worst part was that I was powerless. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about money, power, and who could walk away with the most. The judge didn't look at me with sympathy or kindness. He just nodded and turned his attention back to the case, allowing the lawyers to continue. A few minutes later, my son, Jake, stood up. He had been quiet the entire time, sitting in the back of the room. I could see his nervousness, but I could also see something else: determination. He wasn't the same little boy I had once known. Over the past year, he had grown up in ways I never expected. "Mom," he whispered from the back of the room, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. I turned to him, confused. His face was pale, his eyes wide. But there was something in his gaze, a hint of resolve. "Mom, I need to show something," he said, his voice gaining confidence. Everyone in the courtroom turned toward him, and I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. What was he doing? "Jake, no," I said quickly, my voice shaking with worry. "This isn't the time." But it was too late. He was already walking toward the front of the room, clutching his tablet in his hands. "Please, Mom," he said, looking at me with that steady gaze I hadn't seen in him before. "I need to do this." Jake's words caught in my throat. The weight of the moment, the sense of powerlessness I had been carrying, started to lift. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing: Jake was about to do something that would change everything. The judge, sensing the seriousness of the situation, gestured for Jake to continue. "Go ahead, young man," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. Jake set his tablet on the table, tapping the screen a few times. I couldn't see what he was doing, but the courtroom waited in silence, the air thick with anticipation. Then Jake pressed play. The video started, and I immediately recognized the background. It was our old living room. The familiar furniture, the soft lighting, everything looked normal, peaceful even. But then, my heart dropped. There, on the screen, was Mark, but he wasn't alone. The woman beside him was someone I didn't recognize, but the way they were sitting so close, the way they smiled at each other, made it clear what this was. Mark was with another woman. And there I was in the background, just out of sight, completely unaware. My breath caught in my throat as the video continued. It showed Mark and the woman laughing together, talking, touching. My stomach churned with every passing second. This wasn't just betrayal. It was proof. This was evidence of the lies, the deception, everything he had done behind my back. The courtroom was silent, but my mind was racing. How had Jake gotten this video? I had no idea. But in that moment, everything seemed to freeze. The anger, the sadness, the humiliation, they all blended together. And then it hit me: Jake had known. Jake had known about Mark's affair long before I did. He had been the one to see it, to witness the lies and the hurt. And now, here he was, standing up, showing the truth. For me, for the first time in this entire battle, I wasn't the only one fighting for what was mine. My son was fighting with me. The video ended, and there was complete silence in the room. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the judge, the lawyers, the onlookers. David's face was ashen. He was frozen, his eyes wide in shock, his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He had no words. The video had taken away everything. The mask he had worn for so long, the one that had made him look so composed, was now shattered. The judge, who had remained silent through the entire video, finally spoke. "Mr. Davis," he said, his voice sharp, "do you have an explanation for this?" Mark shook his head, his eyes darting between the video and the judge. I don't know how this happened," he stammered. That's not." "Not what?" The judge's voice cut through the air, firm and unyielding. "What is this video, Mr. Davis? How do you explain this?" Mark opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His lawyer glanced at him, but even he didn't know how to respond. The entire room was watching him, waiting for an answer that would never come. I looked over at Jake. His face was calm, almost serene, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He had done something monumental. He had revealed the truth. And now it was impossible for anyone to deny it. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. "Your Honor," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check, I think the truth is clear. This man has lied to me, to my son, and to everyone around him. He doesn't deserve to have a say in our lives anymore." My words hung in the air, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The judge looked at me, nodding slowly. "The court will take a short recess to review the evidence." I sat down, my hands trembling. Jake sat beside me, his presence calming me in a way I hadn't expected. He had done this for me, for both of us. He had helped me get the truth out into the open. He had been my strength, just as I had always been his. I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled softly at me, his eyes reflecting a maturity beyond his years. "You don't need to thank me, Mom," he said. "I'm just looking out for you." After what felt like an eternity, the judge returned to the courtroom. The tension was thick, but for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt a sense of power. The truth was no longer hidden. I wasn't alone in this fight, and with Jake by my side, I knew I had a chance. The judge cleared his throat. "After reviewing the evidence, this court finds in favor of Ms. Davis. The custody of their son, Jake, will remain with her. The financial settlement will be reviewed in due course, but based on the overwhelming evidence presented today, Mr. Davis will not retain primary custody." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. We won. I turned to Jake, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself cry. These weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, of strength, of love. We had done this together. The judge's gavel came down, signaling the end of the hearing. And as I walked out of that courtroom, hand in hand with my son, I realized that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but we had already faced the hardest part. We had won. And nothing, not Mark, not the past, could take that away from us. The courtroom was still heavy with the shock of what had just unfolded. The sound of the judge's gavel, the rustle of papers, the faint murmurs of the people around us, they all seemed so distant to me. My heart was still racing, and I could barely catch my breath. Jake had done it. He had shown the truth. And the video, the proof of Mark's betrayal, had shaken everything. I sat in my seat, staring at Mark, who was now visibly sweating, his face pale. I had never seen him like this. He looked so vulnerable, so powerless. The man who had once made me feel small, who had controlled so much of my life, was now a shell of the man I had once known. He wasn't even trying to deny the video. His mouth was slightly open, as if the words had just left him. He had nothing left to say. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something inside me, not just anger, but strength. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that courtroom. I wasn't the same woman who had let Mark's betrayal tear her apart. No, I was someone different now. I had been through too much, and I had survived. It was time to take control. I looked at Jake, who was sitting beside me, his eyes locked on the floor. I reached out and placed my hand on his. He looked up at me with a mixture of concern and quiet pride. He had been the one to expose the truth, to stand up for what was right, and I knew, in that moment, that I would fight for him with everything I had. But I also knew that I had to fight for myself. The judge called for a recess, and I stood up, my legs shaking, but I didn't care. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I had just watched the life I thought I knew come crashing down. I had trusted Mark, believed in him, loved him with everything I had. And now, here I was, a woman who had lost everything, but who had gained so much more in the process. Jake had been my rock. I had thought I was the one who had to protect him, to take care of him, but it had been him who had taken care of me. I had never been prouder of him. He had faced the truth head-on, knowing the impact it would have on both of us. I knew that, no matter what, we were in this together. As I walked to the bathroom, trying to steady my nerves, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I had to make a decision. The judge had given us a moment to breathe, but it wouldn't last forever. Mark and his lawyer were already discussing things in hushed voices, probably trying to figure out how they would deal with the damage. But I wasn't going to let this slide. I had already lost too much. I wouldn't lose my son, not to him, not to the man who had destroyed everything we once had. When I returned to the courtroom, I could feel the eyes on me. Mark was still sitting there, a shell of the man who had once been my partner. His face had no color left in it, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. His lawyer sat next to him, flipping through papers, trying to compose themselves. They knew they had lost. The judge called us back into session, and the room fell silent. I could feel the tension thick in the air. The lawyer for Mark began speaking, but I couldn't hear his words. All I could think about was how my world had just changed. How everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, had been shattered in a single moment. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Davis, I understand this has been a difficult day for you. I want to assure you that this court will take all factors into consideration when making a decision about custody. We will consider the evidence presented today, and I will review all of the facts carefully before making my final ruling." I nodded, though I barely heard him. This wasn't about the custody of our son anymore. This was about Mark, about me, about everything he had taken from me and everything I had fought to keep. I wasn't going to leave this room without a victory. Not today. The next few hours passed in a blur. The judge asked questions, reviewed the video, and made notes in front of him. I had never felt so exposed in my life. It felt like every part of my personal life was being laid bare for the world to see. Every intimate moment, every piece of the life I thought I had built, was now in the open. But despite the overwhelming feelings of humiliation and anger, something inside me shifted. I could feel the change in myself. I was stronger than I had ever been. The pain of Mark's betrayal, of the years I had spent living a lie, was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I was taking control now. I was done being passive, done being the victim. Finally, after hours of legal back and forth, the judge called for a break. I stepped out of the courtroom with Jake at my side. I could feel his hand in mine, his quiet strength giving me the courage I needed. I looked down at him, his face set in determination, and I knew he was just as ready as I was to fight for what we deserved. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, his eyes bright with the fire of someone who knew what was at stake. "We're going to be fine, Mom," he said. "We've got this." And in that moment, I realized something. I had always thought I had to protect him, but he had been protecting me. He had been my strength in this. He was the reason I was able to stand here, able to face Mark and everything he had done. When we returned to the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me, and I knew Mark felt it too. His head was lowered, his body stiff. He knew the truth was out now, and there was no going back. The judge cleared his throat. "After reviewing all evidence presented today, including the video and testimony, I have come to a decision." I held my breath. "Custody of Jake will be awarded to Ms. Davis," the judge said, his voice firm. "She has proven to be the primary caregiver, and the evidence presented today confirms that Mr. Davis's actions have caused significant harm to the family structure. Jake's best interests are served by remaining with his mother." I couldn't believe it. The words took a moment to sink in, but when they did, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I had won. I had fought for my son, and I had won. Mark sat there, his face drained of all color, his hands trembling. He looked like a man who had just lost everything. And for the first time, I felt something that surprised me: satisfaction. This was the justice I had fought for. This was the moment that marked the end of the control he had once held over me. The judge continued, "As for the financial division, we will review the details separately. Mr. Davis will be responsible for paying spousal support and contributing to child support moving forward. The division of assets will also be determined in the coming weeks." As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just the custody battle that had been won. It was the battle for my life, my identity. I wasn't the broken woman who had walked into that room earlier. I wasn't the woman who had been discarded. I was stronger now. I had my son, and with him, I could rebuild everything. That night, as Jake and I sat on the couch in our small apartment, I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. He had been my hero today. "You did so well, Jake," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're so brave." He smiled, a little sheepish. "I just wanted to help, Mom. I wanted to make sure you didn't lose." I pulled him into a hug, squeezing him tightly. "You're my everything," I whispered. "We've got each other, and we'll always be okay." As I lay in bed that night, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The pain, the humiliation, the heartbreak, it had all led to this moment. And I realized for the first time that it wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a new chapter, one where I was in control, one where I knew my worth. I closed my eyes, finally at peace, knowing that nothing could break me now. The day after the hearing felt unreal. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The heaviness that had settled in my chest since the day Mark told me he wanted a divorce seemed to lift with the morning sun. But I wasn't going to let myself forget the fight ahead. We had won in court, yes, but there was still so much to do. I had custody, the judge had ruled in my favor, but I knew Mark would fight. He wasn't the type to just walk away. The road ahead was going to be filled with challenges, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could face them. I wasn't alone anymore. My son, Jake, had stood by me in that courtroom, and he had been my rock. He had shown me what it meant to be brave when I felt broken. I stood up from the bed, stretched my arms, and took a deep breath. I looked around the small apartment I'd called home for the past few weeks. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time, I realized that I didn't need anything else. Everything I had been searching for, peace, safety, control, was within my reach. I grabbed my phone and saw a message from Jessica, my best friend. "Hey, how are you holding up? I'm so proud of you for everything you did yesterday. You're amazing." I smiled as I read her message. She had been with me every step of the way, even when I felt like giving up. "Thanks, Jess. It still doesn't feel real, but I'm okay. We did it. I did it. I'm taking my life back." The reply came almost instantly. "You sure did. You've been through so much, but now you're stronger than ever. Let's celebrate soon. You deserve it." I felt a surge of gratitude. Jessica had been my lifeline when I had no one else. She had always believed in me, even when I couldn't see the strength in myself. I promised her we would celebrate soon. I spent the next few hours preparing for work. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face everyone yet, but I knew I had to go back. I had to keep moving forward. I had a job to do, and I wasn't going to let Mark or anyone else take that away from me. The thought of walking into the office after the chaos of the past few weeks made me nervous. I had been so focused on the divorce, on the court hearings, that I hadn't really thought about what would happen once it was over. But now, the reality of going back to my normal routine hit me. It was time to get my life back on track. And that meant facing the world, including my boss and coworkers, with a new sense of purpose. I walked into the office, my heart racing. The receptionist smiled at me as I passed by, and I tried to smile back, though my nerves were still getting the best of me. The truth was, I felt like a different person. The woman who had walked into the office the day before all the chaos started was no longer the same. I had fought through the worst, and now I had to prove that I was capable of succeeding, not just at work, but in life. When I got to my desk, I took a deep breath and sat down, trying to steady my hands. The emails from my boss, Sarah, were waiting for me, as always. There were meetings to attend, projects to finish, and a whole new set of responsibilities to manage. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was doing this for me. I was doing this because I knew I was capable of more. A few hours into the workday, I was called into Sarah's office. I had worked with her for a few years, and though we weren't exactly close, I knew she respected my work. When I entered her office, she looked up from her desk, her face unreadable. "Sarah, come in. I just wanted to check in with you. How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of concern. I hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm okay. I'm getting through it. Thank you for asking." She nodded, though she seemed to sense that there was more I wasn't saying. "I know things have been difficult for you recently, but I want you to know that we're here for you, as a team. You don't have to do this alone." Her words made something inside me shift. For a moment, I thought about how much I had shut myself off from everyone, from work, from friends, from even myself. But hearing Sarah's words made me realize something. I wasn't in this alone anymore. I had a support system. And no matter how hard things had gotten, I had people who cared about me. "I appreciate that, Sarah. Honestly, I'm just focused on getting back to work. I want to do my best. I've been through a lot, but I'm not letting it define me." She smiled, a look of understanding on her face. "That's what I like to hear. You've been doing great work, and I think this will be a good opportunity for you to show everyone just how strong you really are. We'll get through this together." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't going to let my personal life affect my professional one. I had worked hard to get here, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially not Mark, take that away from me. As the weeks went by, things slowly started to return to normal. My routine at work became more comfortable. I was handling the projects with more confidence, and my team started to look to me for guidance. I had been promoted to a senior position before all the drama with the divorce, and I could feel myself growing into the role. The challenges were still there, but I didn't feel as overwhelmed by them anymore. At home, I was still adjusting to the changes. Jake and I had settled into our new routine. He was adjusting to the idea of not living with his father anymore, and I could see the change in him, too. He was growing up. He wasn't the same little boy who had clung to me when we first moved into the apartment. He was confident now, stronger. And I realized that he had been my strength all along. One night, as we sat together watching TV, Jake turned to me and asked, "Mom, do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" I looked at him, my heart aching with the weight of the question. Things would never be the same. The life we had before the divorce was gone, but that didn't mean it was the end. "No," I said softly. "Things won't go back to how they were, but that doesn't mean we can't make something new, something better." Jake nodded slowly, taking in my words. He had always been wise beyond his years. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said quietly. "You've been really strong." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "You're the reason I've been strong, Jake. You've been my strength, too." The months continued to pass, and I began to feel like I had truly reclaimed my life. I was no longer living in the shadow of Mark's betrayal. I had taken control of my own destiny. My relationship with Jake was stronger than ever, and I had started dating again, though I was taking things slowly. I wasn't in a hurry to jump into anything serious. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I thought about everything I had been through. I had lost so much: my marriage, my sense of security, and a part of my heart. But I had also gained so much. I had rediscovered my strength, my independence, and the love of my son. I was no longer the woman who had been discarded and abandoned. I was someone new, someone better. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of the day finally lifted from my shoulders. I closed my eyes, knowing that I had made it through the hardest part, and no matter what came next, I was ready for it. The phone rang the next morning, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Jessica. "Hey, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. "We need to celebrate soon. I'm so proud of you." I smiled, a feeling of contentment settling over me. "We will," I said, my voice steady. "I've come a long way, Jess, and it's just the beginning." I knew it was true. It had been a long, hard road, but I had made it through. And now I was ready to take on whatever came next. The days had blurred together, and honestly, I didn't mind. For the first time in months, I was able to go through my routine without constantly feeling like I was walking on eggshells. I had been living in survival mode for so long, just trying to make it through each day, one foot in front of the other. But now, things felt different. I had my apartment, my job, and most importantly, I had my son, Jake, by my side. We were settling into our new life. It wasn't perfect. We didn't have the luxuries we once did, and I had to be careful with every dollar I spent, but we had everything we truly needed. I was grateful for the small things, the quiet moments when Jake and I would laugh together, when we could sit at the kitchen table and talk about our days. We were a team, and together, we were making it work. But even as I looked around at my small apartment, with its mismatched furniture and peeling paint, I knew I wasn't done yet. There was still so much I wanted for both of us. I had spent years building a life that I thought was perfect, only to have it all ripped away. But now, I had the chance to build something new, something better, something just for me. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself walking through the city, trying to clear my head. Work had been demanding lately, and I had been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't taken the time to just breathe. I needed a break, something to remind me that life was more than just deadlines and meetings. As I walked, I passed a small art gallery tucked between two buildings. I'd noticed it before but had never gone inside. On a whim, I decided to step in. The gallery was small, but it was filled with incredible pieces, paintings, sculptures, photographs. Each piece seemed to tell a story, to carry the weight of someone else's emotions. I stood in front of a large canvas, mesmerized by the colors and the way they swirled together. The piece spoke to me, reminding me of the way my life had been in pieces. The bold, sweeping strokes felt like the chaos I had experienced. But there was something about it, a sense of hope in the way the colors blended, the way they seemed to come together despite the chaos. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, lost in thought. I hadn't realized how much I missed art until that moment. I had always loved painting, even as a child. It had been a way for me to express myself, to make sense of everything I was feeling. But somewhere along the way, I had pushed that part of myself aside. I had let life and responsibilities take over, leaving no room for the things that brought me peace. But now, standing in this gallery, I realized something. I needed to make time for myself again. I needed to find the things that brought me joy. I couldn't keep running on empty, constantly pushing myself to do more without taking care of my soul. The next day, I went to a local art store and bought some basic supplies, paint, brushes, and a small canvas. I didn't know exactly what I was going to paint, but I didn't need to. I just wanted to reconnect with the part of myself I had forgotten. That afternoon, I set up my easel in the corner of my apartment and stared at the blank canvas. I had no idea where to start, but that was okay. I didn't need to have it all figured out. I was just going to let the brush move, let the colors take over. As I dipped the brush into the paint, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. The strokes weren't perfect, and the colors didn't always blend the way I wanted them to, but that was part of the process. Each mistake, each imperfection, was a step forward. I was learning to embrace the mess, to allow myself to make mistakes without feeling like it was the end of the world. By the time I stepped back from the canvas, I was exhausted, but I felt a sense of calm. The painting wasn't anything spectacular, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had created something. I had made time for myself, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was doing something just for me. The next few weeks were filled with more painting. I wasn't trying to become an artist. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed an outlet, a way to express everything I had been holding inside. Slowly, the chaos in my mind began to calm. I realized that painting wasn't just about creating something beautiful, it was about letting go of all the things that weighed me down. It was about giving myself permission to feel, to breathe, to exist without apology. I made time for it every weekend. Sometimes I painted for hours, and other times I'd only pick up the brush for a few minutes. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was doing something that made me feel whole. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was rediscovering who I was, and it felt good. Meanwhile, work was going well. My team had started to come together, and I was gaining confidence in my role. I had been promoted to a senior position not long after the divorce, and although the responsibilities were overwhelming at times, I was starting to realize that I was capable of handling them. I had proven to myself that I could be a leader, even when everything around me felt like it was falling apart. One morning, I received an email from Sarah, my boss. She had been a great mentor to me, and I trusted her opinion more than anyone else. Her message was brief but to the point. Sarah, I wanted to let you know that the board has been really impressed with your work lately. Your leadership has been excellent, and we're planning to give you an even bigger role within the company. You're on the right track. Keep it up. I sat there staring at the email for a long time. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. For so long, I had been doubting myself, questioning whether I was capable of handling everything life had thrown at me. But now, here I was, receiving recognition for the hard work I had put in. It was proof that I wasn't just a victim of my circumstances. I was more than that. I was capable of success. I felt a surge of pride, not just for what I had achieved, but for who I had become. The woman I was now was different from the one who had walked into that courtroom months ago. I had faced my worst fears, my deepest pain, and come out stronger on the other side. I had proven to myself that I could do anything I set my mind to. A few days later, Sarah asked me to meet with her for a more in-depth conversation. I was nervous but excited. What was she going to say? When I walked into her office, she looked up from her desk and smiled. "Come in, Sarah. Sit down. I wanted to talk to you about your future here. You've been doing incredible work, and I think you're ready for something bigger." My heart skipped a beat. Bigger, what did that mean? "We've been talking about a new position for you, something that will involve overseeing more projects and leading a larger team. It's a big responsibility, but I have no doubt that you're ready for it," she continued. I blinked, trying to absorb what she was saying. A bigger position, more responsibility. I don't know what to say, I stammered. You don't have to say anything right now, but I want you to know that we're offering you this because we see your potential. You've really stepped up in the last few months, and I'm confident that you can take on more." I smiled, my eyes tearing up slightly. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't let you down." I left her office with a mix of emotions. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it was all paying off. This was my chance to prove that I wasn't just a survivor of my past. I was a woman who could build her own future. As I walked back to my desk, I took a deep breath, letting the news sink in. I had come so far, and this promotion, this new opportunity, was a symbol of everything I had worked for. But it wasn't just about the position or the title. It was about the fact that I had earned it. I had built my life from scratch, and now I was standing on the foundation I had created. That evening, as I sat on the couch, Jake beside me, I thought about how much had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of Mark's house, broken and lost. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that courtroom, begging for justice. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had learned to live for herself. And as I looked at Jake, I realized that everything I had done, everything I had fought for, was for him. He had been my strength when I didn't think I had any left. And now, I was showing him what it meant to fight for your future, to take control of your life no matter what obstacles come your way. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew one thing for sure: I was ready for whatever came next. Because I had already proven to myself that I could handle anything. And that was the most empowering feeling in the world. The days had started to stretch out in front of me, each one an opportunity to move further away from the past. The anger, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, it was all fading into the background. The more I worked, the more I focused on building my new life, the easier it became to breathe, to take control of the direction I was headed in. But there were still moments when the weight of everything I had lost threatened to pull me back into that dark place. And so I had to fight, not just for the life I wanted, but for the peace I deserved. Work had been demanding, but it felt like a steady rhythm. I had settled into my new position, managing larger projects and overseeing a small team. The challenge was there, and I welcomed it. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was thriving. I had worked hard to prove to everyone, but most importantly to myself, that I was capable. But despite all the professional success, something still felt missing. I had my son, my job, and my independence. But I had sacrificed so much of myself in the process of rebuilding that I hadn't realized I was neglecting one of the most important things of all: me. I had become so focused on keeping everything together, on proving to myself that I was strong, that I had lost sight of the woman I had been before everything fell apart. I had stopped doing the things that made me happy, that made me feel alive. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had forgotten how to have fun. That's when I decided it was time to make a change. It wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't know exactly how to do it, but I knew one thing for sure: I needed to reconnect with who I was outside of work, outside of being a mother, outside of everything else that had defined me. I had always loved painting, but it had been years since I picked up a brush. So that's what I decided to do first. I went to the art supply store one Saturday afternoon. The feeling of being surrounded by paints, brushes, and blank canvases brought a wave of nostalgia. I had forgotten how much I loved it. I picked up the supplies I needed and headed home, eager to start something for myself. That evening, I set up a small space in the living room, near the window. The light from the street lamp outside gave the room a warm glow, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The quietness of the room, the peaceful solitude, was exactly what I needed. I started with simple strokes, nothing complicated. The first painting was a mess of colors, nothing like I imagined, but it felt good. It felt freeing. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to create something perfect. I was just allowing myself to feel, to express everything I had been holding inside. It didn't matter if the painting wasn't great. What mattered was that I was doing something for me, something that made me happy. The next few weeks were filled with small moments of rediscovery. I made time to paint. I took walks around the neighborhood, breathing in the fresh air and feeling the sunshine on my face. I called my old friends, the ones I had lost touch with in the chaos of the divorce, and we made plans to meet up. I realized I had been isolating myself in a way that I hadn't fully understood. I had distanced myself from the things I loved, from the people who cared about me, because I thought I had to do everything alone. But I didn't. I had never been alone, even when I thought I was. I started making time for the things that brought me joy. I spent evenings reading, something I hadn't done in forever. I found myself getting lost in stories again, escaping into worlds that weren't my own. It felt like a small act, but it was a reminder that I wasn't just a worker or a mother. I was a person, too, and I had every right to enjoy life. At work, things were also starting to shift. My confidence was growing with every project, every task I completed. The team I was leading was responsive, and we were moving forward in ways I hadn't expected. I felt like I was finally stepping into my role, not just as a manager, but as someone who could make an impact. And it wasn't just the work that was changing. I was changing, too. I noticed it during meetings, the way I held my head a little higher, the way I spoke with more conviction. It wasn't that I wasn't still nervous at times, but the fear wasn't the same. I didn't feel like I was faking it anymore. I was becoming the leader I had always wanted to be, and it felt good. One afternoon, Sarah, my boss, called me into her office. I had been expecting a routine check-in, but as she closed the door behind me, I sensed that this was something different. "Sarah," she began, her voice warm but serious, "I've been keeping an eye on your progress lately. And I have to say, I'm really impressed. Your leadership has been outstanding, and the projects you've been managing are going smoothly. I'm confident you're ready for more." I looked at her surprised. "More?" She nodded. "Yes, I think you're ready for a bigger challenge. I'd like to offer you a new role, a senior manager position. It comes with more responsibility, but I have no doubt you'll be able to handle it." For a moment, I was speechless. My heart skipped a beat. A senior manager position? This was everything I had been working for. The past few months had been about proving to myself that I could succeed, but this was proof that I had. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. "You don't have to say anything just yet. Think about it, but I truly believe you're ready for this next step." She smiled at me. "You've earned it." I felt a surge of pride, followed by a rush of disbelief. I was being given a chance to take on more, to prove even more than I already had. I had fought for this. I had earned it. And now I had the opportunity to show everyone that I wasn't just a survivor. I was a leader. The next few days were a whirlwind. I spent time reflecting on the offer and what it would mean for me and Jake. It was a big decision, but deep down, I knew I was ready for it. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first walked into that office, unsure of myself and afraid to take risks. I had grown, and I had learned to trust myself. I accepted the position a few days later, and the change was immediate. There were new responsibilities, new challenges, but I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt excited. I felt empowered. This was my moment, and I was going to make the most of it. With every new project, I felt more and more confident. I started setting goals for myself, both at work and in my personal life. I made time for Jake and me, creating new memories in our small apartment. We explored new hobbies, took weekend trips to places we hadn't seen before, and made sure to enjoy the simple moments that so often got lost in the hustle of life. And then, one evening, as we sat on the couch together, Jake turned to me with a look I hadn't seen in him before. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm really proud of you. I see how hard you've been working, and I think you're doing great. I know things haven't been easy, but you've been strong through it all." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, baby. You've been my strength, too." He smiled, resting his head on my shoulder. "We're in this together." In that moment, I realized that everything I had gone through had led me to this, not just the success, but the understanding that it wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about being the best at everything. It was about growth, about doing my best each day, and about realizing that I was enough. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece. I had found my strength again, and as I looked at Jake, I knew that no matter what happened, I had already won. I had a future to look forward to. And that future, I realized, was mine to create. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on the living room. I stretched my arms over my head and sighed, the weight of the past few months finally beginning to lift. I had survived the worst of it, the darkest moments, and now it was time to truly start living again. I looked around the room. It wasn't much, a few pieces of second-hand furniture, a simple kitchen with just the essentials, but it was mine. It was ours, Jake's, and mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I didn't need the fancy house, the expensive vacations, or the perfect image that Mark had once painted for us. I had everything I needed right here. As I got up and began my morning routine, I thought about how far I'd come. I used to think my worth was tied to my relationship with Mark, to our life together. But I had learned the hard way that your worth comes from within. I had built a life for myself, and though it wasn't perfect, it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was proud of myself. The past year had been a roller coaster of emotions. Divorce, betrayal, fighting for custody of my son, and struggling to get my life back on track. But with each challenge, I had found strength I didn't know I had. And in the process, I had rediscovered pieces of myself I had long forgotten. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving, and that was a feeling I hadn't known in years. Jake was still sleeping when I finished getting ready. I took a moment to look at him, lying peacefully in his bed. He had grown up so much in the past year. He wasn't the same boy who had clung to me in fear when we first moved into our new apartment. He was confident, strong, and most of all, he was my reason for everything. He had been my support through all of this, my anchor when I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know how I would have gotten through the past few months without him. He had shown me that even in the darkest moments, there was light. He had stood by me in that courtroom, with a quiet strength that I admired more than anything. He had helped me see that the most important thing wasn't what I had lost, but what I had left. Him, my health, and my ability to start over. The thought of all we had been through, the betrayal, the pain, the heartache, it made me realize something. I had been so focused on rebuilding my life, on proving that I could survive, that I hadn't really stopped to enjoy the simple moments. I hadn't allowed myself to feel happiness in the way I deserved. But now I knew I could, and I would. After breakfast, I sat at my desk, looking over emails and checking in with work. Things had been busy, but they were good busy. I had settled into my new role at work, and I was thriving. My team was growing stronger, and the projects we were working on were taking off in ways I hadn't expected. I thought back to when I first started at this company, unsure of myself, unsure if I was even capable of doing the job. But now I was leading. I was in control. I was the one people came to for answers, for guidance. I had earned this. And it wasn't just about the work or the title, it was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. That afternoon, I received a call from Sarah, my boss. She was someone I had come to respect deeply. She had been there for me when I needed guidance, and now I was becoming the leader she had always believed I could be. "Hey, Sarah," I said, answering the phone. "Hi, Sarah. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "I've been hearing great things from your team. You're really stepping into this role, and I wanted to let you know how much I appreciate all your hard work." "Thank you," I said, feeling a sense of pride. "It's been a learning experience, but I'm really enjoying it." "I can tell," she replied. "In fact, the board has been talking, and we want to offer you an even bigger role in the company. We think you're ready for more responsibility. We want to give you the chance to take on more senior projects." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting this. "More responsibility?" I echoed. "Yes, we've been really impressed with how you've been handling everything. You've taken on challenges and excelled, and we think it's time to take the next step. Are you interested?" I paused for a moment, my mind racing. I was already juggling so much work, raising Jake, building a life from the ground up, but something inside me said, "You can do this. You've got this." "I'm definitely interested," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down." "You've already proved yourself, Sarah. I know you'll do great in this new role." I hung up the phone, my heart swelling with pride. This was it. This was the moment I had worked for. It wasn't just about the recognition. It wasn't about the title. It was about knowing that I had earned it, that I had built this life with my own hands. And now, the universe was handing me more. Later that evening, I sat down with Jake for dinner. He was telling me about his day at school, his friends, and how his soccer team had won their game. I listened with a smile, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the small moments we shared. You know, Jake, I said after he finished talking, today I got offered a new position at work. More responsibility, more projects. I'm excited but also a little nervous. He looked at me with that wise, serious expression he always had when he was thinking deeply. Mom, you've got this. You've always been strong, even when things were hard. I know you can handle it. His words hit me harder than I expected. My son, the one I had fought for, the one who had been my strength when I was at my lowest, believed in me. And in that moment, I realized how much his belief in me had shaped my own strength. He had shown me that it was okay to be afraid, but that fear didn't have to stop me. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about moving forward despite the fear. I'm going to give it everything I've got, Jake, I said, my voice steady. And I'll always be here for you, no matter what. He smiled and nodded. I know, Mom, and I'm always here for you too. The days passed, and as I stepped into my new role at work, I realized something. This wasn't just a job. This wasn't just about moving up the corporate ladder. This was about proving to myself that I could create the life I had always dreamed of. I was doing it. I was building something that was mine. I was living for me, and I was making it work. At home, Jake and I settled into a routine that felt right. I made sure to keep time for us, for the little things, the dinners we shared, the walks we took in the park, the moments when we just sat together and talked about everything and nothing at all. These were the moments that made everything worth it. The quiet, simple moments. I still had a long way to go. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control. I had been knocked down, but I had risen again. I had fought for my son, for my life, and now I was building a future that was my own. And as I sat on the couch that evening, watching Jake laugh as he played a video game, I knew that everything was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. The journey wasn't over, but it had just begun. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And I was ready for whatever came next. I closed my eyes and thought about everything I had overcome. The struggles, the pain, the heartache. I had walked through fire, and now I stood on the other side, stronger than I had ever been. I had a future, and it was mine to create. I was finally free.